I always find it quite funny when you see people around and about in London, particularly goths, you know what ones I mean? The ones that are all dressed in black, have all that white makeup on and the dark nail polish and the studded boots, and they're so radical, aren't they? You know, they think they're changing the face of the modern youth, you know what I mean? We've all been there. If you cast your mind back, of course, to the 1970s and the punk rock movement, it seemed so shocking at that time, didn't it? Johnny Rotten, the Sex Pistols, Sid Vicious, all of those things. Even further, of course, the 60s, the Beatles, the Stones. Oh, we were all going to be young and living forever, and who needed the older generation? But it's funny how the older generation comes around, because way back in the middle 50s, arriving at Waterloo Station was this man, a man with a camel coat and a kiss curl, who apparently had brought, well, untamed youth to Great Britain, but more importantly, ended up having a huge fan and a member of the British monarchy. Let me explain. How are you? Nice to have your company today. So I've got the giggles, as you can imagine, you know. But the thing is, it just makes you laugh when you think about youth, doesn't it? Because, you know, when you buy that record that you think is just going to shock everybody, and you wander around, and you remember with the vinyl sticking out, and people, oh, he's got that, you know. Who remembers Dead or Alive's Youthquake with the outrageous Pete Burns and that look that's launched 1,000 sort of gothic looks? I worked up with Pete Burns on numerous occasions. Great fun man. But of course, it was all theatre. That's the thing, isn't it? What you find shocking at that moment is not necessarily shocking in the future. But it's interesting to note, because as I mentioned, Bill Haley, he rode into Waterloo Station alongside his wife, and women were swooning for this 31-year-old. Apparently he was the new king of rock and roll, with hits like Rock Around the Clock, based along with the movie. Cinema seats were being ripped up, untamed youth was running riot in cinemas, climbing onto the stage and smashing furniture. Oh, it's terrible things, wasn't it? But that was the youth of the 1950s, the Teddy Boys as they were called over here in the United Kingdom. What I find fascinating to note, though, and it's often this, isn't it, you know, fast forward a few years, well, in fact, to the 1979 Royal Variety Performance. Now, that, as ever, was a major event. There's no two ways about it. The Royal Variety Performances, as many people know who watch this channel, are a pivotal event in the royal calendar. They do so much because, quite frankly, having a royal there makes sure that that particular charity, for people who are, say, fallen on hard times within the theatrical world. I know you're looking at me, aren't you? I will be moving in there, I know. I know. Well, I'll be moving in with you at this rate, you know, money where I'm on, but you know, but you know what I mean. But seriously, they do a lot of good. Now, Bill Haley was one of the major guests at the 1979 Royal Variety Performance. Lots of big stars on there. Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh were in attendance. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Particular period, you see, the bosses of the Royal Variety would go over to Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle and sort of outline exactly the sort of show they were going to put together. And was there anything, you know, anything at all that Her Majesty maybe would like to see, you know, ballet, classical music, magician, that sort of thing. She spotted Bill Haley's name in the list of potential performers, and she said, oh, yeah, now, that's nice. Maybe he could do another song. And that's exactly how it happened, because apparently Her Majesty the Queen, alongside the beautiful Princess Margaret, were huge Bill Haley fans, playing those 78 records inside palace walls. And because of Her Majesty the Queen saying, yeah, you know, could you do a little bit more? That's how Bill Haley extended his set on the 1979 Royal Variety Show. When apparently they met in the famous lineup after the show, she said to him, we've been fans of yours for years. It was wonderful to hear all of those songs again. I think I'm going to go and dig them out and relive those wonderful memories. Bill apparently beamed with pride, couldn't believe after all these years that he had so many royal fans. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, as we find out these little, vignettes of things about what our wonderful late monarch was like at that time. She too would have been incredibly young. She too would have enjoyed the rebel youth of Bill Haley and his comments. And all those years later, in 1979, she simply wanted to relive it again. Now, are you all going to be looking for Rock Around the Clock on YouTube after this? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.